So this paper I'm giving you is two-sided. It's basically excerpts from what we read last night. And we're going to break up into a few groups just to start. And you're each going to have two of these concepts. And so I want you to be answering two questions. The first one is, what is Pascal's point? Right? What is he trying to say? And the second thing I want you to answer is, how is he similar to or different from Descartes? Right? What would Descartes say about this? Would he agree? Maybe yes on some things, maybe no on others. Okay? So think about both of those points. So let's see. Let's do Kent, Merritt, and Anna. Why don't you guys do 44 and 45? Caroline, Alexis, and Zoe. Why don't you guys do 131 and 188? Marina, Luke, and Obi. Why don't you guys do 110 and 423? And then who's left? Michael, Ryan, and Sophia. Why don't you guys do 190 and 449? Okay? So take a few minutes, read it over carefully. Also underline. I also know specifically what parts of those passages are supporting what you think.
So I guess he's kind of agreeing. I don't know. Even though he hates skeptics, he's agreeing with them.
So he's saying that we were not having. So I mean, actually, we're not.
only know it.
So like, what is all this? Why did I do
Yeah,
that?
so what would they character about that?
That's so crazy.
Just like doubt everything, erase
Oh,
things.
well then he's, we kind of don't understand what.
It's Weezy for a while, just like, because he does not like skeptics. However, he's kind of agreeing with them, and we don't know if it's sarcasm.
Okay, what part is sarcasm?
131, just like let us then concede to the skeptics what they have so often proclaimed.
Yeah, so what part is he agreeing?
He's agreeing that the truth is beyond our scope and God will only like show it to us when he wants to.
Yeah, I'm not sure the skeptics believe in the last part he said.
Yeah,
But Pascal adds
To be known in so far as it pleases him to reveal it.
Yeah, I mean, what is the paradox? Like, why is he calling hanging out a paradox, right? It's the very first line.
because they're good and wretched.
Yeah, and I think that's his point, right? It's that, like, don't be too proud. Humble yourself and hold your peace.
Just like him doing.
Yeah, I mean, when not powerful, right? So, he's saying, yeah, you're great in that you try things, you know, what the universe does. And on the other hand, like, you're so limited, you'll never be able to know anything, right? So just like the skeptics are saying, in a sense, you won't be able to know anything. Except he says that at some point you will, right? But it's not until we go to have to go after our life. That's the part I'm not sure the skeptics are, right? I think he's sort of you know, it's always about the greatness. Like, he can't say something about greatness without also adding something about greatness, right? So, like, I think that's why you're seeing
That is why those who follow God give religious faith by moving their hearts, by moving their hearts in very fortunate. If you're quite ignorant and convinced,
Let's doubt everything.
those who do not and give such faith.
Yeah, so he would not agree with this because he thinks that reason is like talk.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, he
I
would
don't
not
think he would
agree.
easily accept that the truth is just beyond our scope and it's unexplainable.
Yeah, and telling the reason that we humble, he would not like that.
He would definitely. Let's just start from the beginning. We can do this.
Reason
Maybe
for
we're not
everything.
reaching. We're not trying to.
Yeah, reason is the only thing we can trust. And then 188, reason is
Yeah.
that his recognition bears to everything which is beyond God. He would hate that because the only reason is his reason.
Yeah. He identifies so much with it.
Yeah, it's like taking me as a little pool cubby.
Hearts. Our mind has its reasons, but those reasons aren't
Yeah,
reasons.
yeah, I think that's really you're right.
It doesn't mean reason. These two don't say that you don't have to say.
All right, guys, you ready?
I know what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first group, over here, you guys read 44 and 45, right? So tell us, what is Pascal, what point is he trying to make in these first couple of concepts?
Further, our senses can deceive us and imagination also, but we still should have definition that all the time because they're inspired us sort of.
Yeah, so what examples does he give of our senses and our imagination deceiving us? Here.
The first one was the philosopher of matter, how wide it is or if it makes space for imagination, what is we can make they're gonna fall.
Yeah, if you're scared of heights, right, it doesn't matter how big that plane is, right? It doesn't matter, you know, how reasonable you are. Say you're one of the greatest philosophers, right? If you're scared of heights, you're going to be scared, right? And even though reason tells you you can't fall off if you go move, right, on that plane. What other examples does he give? How our senses and our imagination can obscure our reason. Okay.
You brought up the point about an empty box and like information is basically saying that it's supposed to give you an empty box and you should look at it. You know that there's nothing in there, but in relation to space, there's nothing like he says something that's not anything being inside the box and you can think of a vacuum being inside.
Okay.
I'm not really like I can't even remember exactly how he put it, but the one is saying that like even though like there's nothing inside the box and you can see there's nothing inside, you still believe that there's a vacuum inside the box.
So what you think you know and what you see with your senses could be two different things. Yeah. Other examples he gives? not laugh at this sentence? He says, everyone knows, that the sight of cats or rats or the crunching of coal is enough to unhinge reason. Does the sight of cats unhinge your reason? Do you not laugh at this? No? Pascal is clearly not a cat lover, right? So fill in the blank with whatever scares you. What scares you? Like what unhinges your reason? Watch this.
Is he talking about like stuff that you just can't stand, or like the cats? Is he talking about he's afraid of cats, or is it just like making him?
What do you guys think? I mean, does the sight of rats unhinge your reason?
No.
Caroline?
Because like even though you like if you see a spider, even though you know it's not gonna hurt you, you're still scared of it.
Yes, right. The spider is so much smaller than you, and as fast as they seem, and I agree, they seem so fast. You're actually faster, right? So like when you can't sleep at night because you saw that spider up there, and like it takes you an hour to fall asleep, is that reasonable? No, right? So fill in the blank. For Pascal, it was cats, but it doesn't have to be. Yeah, let's
I think for me it's probably butterflies. I don't
Okay, if you're.
I'm definitely afraid of butterflies. I just don't like how unpredictable they are when they're flying. They just switch directions so fast, and I'm very scared of them. So I threw Domi's phone once when a butterfly came near me.
Yeah, that's definitely. There's a reason Pascal.
Of course it was Domi.
Everybody knows that the sight of butterflies is enough to unhinge reason. He also says, like, he points out the fact like the tone of voice influences the wisest of us, right? So if somebody gives this poem with this extraordinary delivery, but the words aren't actually great, we might actually be kind of moved enough, right, by our sensory experience of it to think, wow, that was really good, as opposed to somebody who maybe says it in a less persuasive tone, but actually is saying something that's more convincing, right? Okay, so what would Descartes say about this? Yeah.
I think it's kind of weird because Pascal is kind of saying like the exact same thing, but in the same way he's attacking Descartes, because Descartes' basic thing is that reason is like the most powerful thing. Like if you only had reason, nothing else, you would be fine, because like reason is like the most powerful thing you can have. And he also says like the senses, like to see you, that's when you focus on reason, but Pascal is saying that imagination is more powerful than reason. Like reason is only as important because imagination is could like easily deceive you. And he also says that the senses, because the imagination causes your senses to deceive you, so it's kind of the same thing, but at the same time. It's like,
Yeah, you're right. They're both definitely saying that the senses deceive us, right? Descartes uses the example of the sun, right? We see the sun and it looks this big, but it's really not, right? We can be dreaming, right? And it feels real, but it's not, right? Our senses deceive us. So maybe you're saying that Descartes is a little bit more optimistic about it? Pascal is maybe quicker to point out also kind of the reasons for that, right? What are the reasons for the fact that our senses can deceive us? Because remember, reason is that capacity we've been given that is not been given to any other living creature. Why is it that reason can be so easily deceived by senses and imagination? How would Pascal explain it?
I think he says that when you're dreaming, you feel like you're living, so then how could you know the difference of like living, like if you're sleeping or not?
So sort of that dreaming example? Yeah. Anything else you guys want to add to the passages that you've read? Yeah, Ken.
Transgression, so when it's full of error, when it can be saved
Yes.
by divine grace.
Yes, right, and that's Pascal, right? He's always pointing out the wretchedness, but for him there's a solution, right? There's a solution, and it's Christ, right? It's Christianity is having faith, right? So it's through grace that fallen nature is fixed. Okay, what about the next group? So who is that? We did 131, 180. So who has? Okay, what do you think? What is Pascal trying to say? So,
In 131, he's basically talking about paradoxing and how man is both great and wretched, and but he's talking about reason and how we have the capacity to know everything. However, we can never know anything unless God lets us. And he's just talking about how like we should humble our reason more because like it's too arrogant. And then in 181, he's further humbling the reason by
that's such a great line, right? Look at 188. He's saying reason's last step is the recognition that there are an infinite number of things which are beyond it. Think about what he's saying there. He's saying that to be reasonable means that you recognize the limits of reason. Right? Again, paradoxical, because that's Pascal, right? But he's saying to be reasonable is to understand that reason will not get you everywhere, right? It will not help you know everything. So that paradox is that line that we're talking about is the very first line of 131, right? Know then, proud man, what a paradox you are to yourself, right? This is the thing you read, right? He says, be humble, impotent reason. So man is a paradox because they have the capacity to reason, right? Unlike any other living thing. But at the same time, we'll never have that sort of full knowledge, right? We only meet uncertainty. I really like the line where he talks about what Zoe's saying about when we will acquire full reason, right? So in that next line in 131, he says, in the third line, truth lies beyond our scope. It is an unattainable quarry. That it is no earthly denizen, but at home in heaven. What does he mean by it is no earthly denizen? So what does that mean?
Like it can't exist on earth that we can only know in heaven.
Yeah, right. It's not like knowledge is hidden in some place on earth, right? We will only come to that kind of full knowledge after this life. Okay, what do you think Descartes would say? Caroline?
He would totally disagree, I think.
Yeah, in what sense?
He says that reason is like almost at the highest and we know everything by reason.
So do you think he would agree with Pascal's claim that we find uncertainty?
I think he would agree with the skeptic's view because he's a skeptic.
Okay. I'm not sure I would say he's a skeptic. I think he and the skeptics have the same first step, which is doubting.
Yeah.
But do you think Descartes' final goal is doubting?
No.
Yeah. What is his sort of conclusions he makes? And yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say that I think we would disagree that reason won't get us the answer. I think he believes that reason is the way to get the answer. So by Pascal saying that we should understand that reason isn't going to get us there, but it's finite, I feel like Descartes would disagree with that.
Yeah, I think you both are right? So there's the skeptics who think that they doubt everything and they think we can never know anything. Then Descartes is really a rationalist, right? Doubting is the first step, but he does believe that if we can separate our intellect from the senses, right, we can achieve knowledge, right, with certainty. So I think you're right that he has sort of in a way, more optimistic view, right, about what humans are capable of knowing. Anything else you guys want to add to that? Okay, third group was back here, right? Okay, so you guys did maybe 110 and 423. Okay, what do you think? What is Pascal trying to say here?
We focused on 423 a lot, because just the way, like he says, the heart has its reasons, of which reason knows nothing. So, first thing that we kind of noticed is that I think he's doing a play on the words. I don't think reasons and reason, I don't think he's talking about the same thing.
I think you're
I
right.
think reason is like actual reason, logic,
Yeah.
truth, but reasons, with an S, implies that it's something different. So it's like not just like it's all like the different things that contribute. So
Right, like more of an explanation.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I think what he's trying to say is the heart, like we don't know what the heart wants because like we are more of like our minds, like we know what our minds want, and we kind of talked about like we are like basically our minds, like we are our bodies, but like really like everything we think is really our minds, and we have a heart, and it like makes us stay alive, but we don't know what it wants, or like we can't like talk to it internally, I guess. So that was interesting.
Yeah, we haven't really talked much about this heart element, right? We've been focusing really on kind of the more mind intellect part. Marina, you want to add anything to that?
I think in 110, we talked about body, religious faith, finding our hearts, the good people are fortunate, and then the reason is almost going to back up. To like, yeah, it's like a second choice.
Yeah, so they're both after the same goal, right? Which is knowing, right, in some way. But they sort of achieve it by different ways, right? You're talking about how when God sort of moves our hearts, right? We think of that as more akin to what we believe by faith, right? Yeah, but
I think Obi like kind of brought this up, but he was saying like the mind has to do with like logic and reason, but the heart is like truth, like internally. The heart is like the main truth. Our mind is just like logic and things that we do, like.
so what's necessary for faith? Would you say? What does Pascal say? What do you think? The mind, the heart, both, neither.
I mean, I think it's both, because the heart will show you, like, it'll let you know if it's like true. Like when people say trust your instinct or trust your gut,
Yeah, he's talking about that kind of intuition, right? Which we can't really explain.
they just know like it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And you need your mind, because like there's some situations where like you can't really just be like, oh, I'm gonna just go in and see where it leads me to. Like there's some situations that like end you up in a bad position, like you just don't want to be involved in it from the beginning. So I think you might need both.
Yeah, he came up with wager, right? He says, okay, we can use as a starting point this really kind of like rational way of thinking about whether it's beneficial or not to believe in God, right? But will that rationality actually automatically make you a true believer? No, right? He says it could be the first step, but you're going to need to eventually have that faith, that inner conviction, right? And that's what he's calling the heart, right? Okay, now the last group, you guys did 190 and 449, right? Yeah, we're both.
Yeah, so a couple ideas that we thought that Pascal was trying to show through this, through 190, was that it's pretty hard to understand the existence of God, and that trying to people aren't really confident. And actually said on like the page, he says because an hour later they would be afraid that they made a mistake. I think that's trying to people aren't really confident with their understanding of God. And
Yeah, so in that context, he's talking about metaphysical proof for the existence of God. What does he mean by that? I think he's speaking about the kind of like abstract theoretical proofs that Descartes made, right? Remember the proof for God's existence that Descartes makes, right, in the discourse? I think that's the kind of thing he's talking about. So he's saying that kind of proof, he says, makes little impact because it would only be for the moment during which they watched the demonstration that they would believe it. Because an hour later, they would be afraid they had made a mistake. Do you feel like that's what you read Descartes? Yes. Yeah, I mean, do you agree with Pascal? Do you think he's making a fair point here? So what else is he saying in the rest of that?
You said like sense you can't physically use God
Mhm.
or understand him, like you have to know their heart that he's a feeling.
Okay, yeah. What do you think Descartes would say about this? And you guys, I didn't ask you this question, but I think you guys have similar reading. What do you think Descartes would say?
about 190.
Either one of them, yeah.
I think that Dr. Descartes completely disagrees because his whole text is based on how reason is everything. And Pascal was pretty much saying that reason means nothing. He said reason makes little impact on the proofs of the existence of God.
Yeah. What do you think he means by that makes little impact? He says these metaphysical proofs for God make little impact.
I think what he means by the impact is that like whatever you say, when after the first step, like okay, God exists, you still have to feel it. So you can believe that there's a God, but you have to have a connection with God. He's talking about little impact.
Yeah. So in terms of for salvation, right, making little impact. Yeah, I think so. Look at the second paragraph of 449. Okay, he says the Christian's God does not consist merely of a God who is the author of mathematical truths in the order of the elements. He is a God who fills the soul and heart of those whom he possesses. He is a God who makes them inwardly aware of their wretchedness and his infinite mercy, who unites himself with them in the depths of their soul. What point is he trying to make here? Okay.
Trying to say that you don't need reason to know God. It's like he talks to you in your heart.
Okay, or if you do use these kinds of abstract metaphysical proofs that Descartes is using, what does that really tell you about God and who he is?
It just like proves his existence for like more than what you already know.
Yeah, right. It gives you a very limited understanding of God. God, right? It only tells you that God is what he says here, the author of mathematical truths, right? But Pascal is saying that God is so much more than that, and reason itself will never understand those other parts about who God is, right? Other thoughts on these last few concepts? What did you make of Concept 887? Were you shocked when you read this, or were you, Descartes, useless and uncertain. I think Descartes would roll over in his grave if he ever heard someone calling him uncertain, right? That was like his goal in life, to be as far away from uncertainty as he possibly could. Who?
I thought it was great. When I read that, I was like,
Yeah, I know. What a job.
And honestly, like personally, I like reading this book better. So like then.
Oh, so you're like, go Pascal! Yeah, Zoe.
I think you, with all of this, right, you was kind of like saying, it's like, kind of like mocking Descartes, just like, oh, reason is so evil, you can't use anything. And then just the last sentence is just the cherry on top, just like, he's useless and uncertain.
So, what do you think he really means by saying he's useless and uncertain? Right? Those are the two words he picked. Kat, what do you think?
I think he, so I can tell in terms of the case of Descartes because he, Descartes does not accept or suggest anything that is true.
Okay.
So,
So that's the useless part?
I mean, that's uncertain.
That's the uncertain part. Yeah. Okay, what else, Anna?
Well, Descartes' whole thing is that everything we're going to stop it. I'm going to use reason to find an answer. And that's pretty much like, well, if you're going to use reason, you're not going to get in the right direction. That's what that sounds like.
Yeah, or you only get so far.
Yeah,
Right.
so it's kind of useless doing all that.
Yeah. Other thoughts? This killer line again.
It's harsh.
Yeah. Think about how they approach this question about proving God's existence, right? Pascal in the wager is not really proving God's existence at all, right? In fact, he says reason is not going to help me do that, so I'm not even going to try it, right? Instead, he'll say, okay, let's try to prove why it's more reasonable to believe in God, but that's a different question. Descartes, though, actually tries to prove it, right? And kind of uses that proof as a means to knowing other things, right? Or I think Pascal might say, the proof that God exists maybe should be the end, right? Should be the end and not the means. So they both lived during the Enlightenment. But Descartes is really someone we think of more as an Enlightenment thinker, as kind of ascribing to this emphasis on reason, right? And Pascal kind of gives us, I think, a wider lens. He was a scientist, he was a mathematician, right? So he's certainly, into that sort of Enlightenment desire for knowledge, right? In many different spheres. But he's always looking at the big picture, right? And he's always balancing the greatness with the wretchedness, right? Which is what I think he's doing here. What do you think? Do you think reading these two authors together helps you understand them more? Or, because they're hard. I think Descartes is one of the hardest books that we read. What do you think? Any thoughts on, yeah?
I guess it was kind of like two people presenting their own ideas. They both obviously contradicting each other, kind of different jury.
Yeah, it's a good question. Other thoughts? Did you enjoy Pascal?
Yes.
Yes? Why did you like him? He's funny. He's so